I always believed clay was an honest medium. You press your fingers into it and it records every truth. The ridges of your thumb, the tremor of your doubt, the pause where you second-guess a curve. But on the cool May morning when Martin Calder's body was pulled from Crescent Lake, I learned that even honest clay can sit beside a lie. The annual community raku firing had been my idea back when the town council wanted a summer attraction that didn't involve yet another fisherman's derby. My studio, Stonewheel Pottery, joined forces with Martin's Place, Red Earth Kilns, and we hauled 2 brick-lined barrels, propane burners, bundles of straw, metal tongs, and sooty garbage cans to the public beach. The raku tradition: heat the pots fast, yank them out at a glowing red, smother them in combustible material, then dunk them in water, produced dramatic crackles and unpredictable metallic sheens that photographers loved almost as much as potters did. Last year, the local paper devoted the entire front page to a shot of steam exploding off a pot I'd made. Martin's grin filled the banner above my shoulder, claiming equal ownership of the headline. He and I were competitors, yes, but the playful kind, at least I thought so. I called our rivalry the clay dance. We'd trade students, tips, even glaze recipes, then vie for the same gallery slots. When customers asked which studio was better, I joked that my work was the poetry while Martin's was the manifesto. That morning, 50 or so townspeople formed a ring around our makeshift kiln. I demonstrated how the bisqued pots, after heating to 1800 degrees, would emerge fiery orange. Martin narrated, ever the showman. The kiln reached temperature. I opened the lid, hiss of flame. Martin's tongs slipped under a vase rim. It should have been my turn next, but he nudged me aside, murmuring, "Watch this, Fiona." He raised the vase overhead. The audience drew a collective breath, and he strode to the metal trash can lined with shredded newspaper and straw. The pot ignited the bedding, tongues of flame licking upward. Martin slapped on the lid, starved the fire of oxygen, then rolled the can toward the waterline. "To give the pot a baptism," he shouted. I felt the first prick of unease then. The baptism step usually waited 10 minutes, but Martin was improvising. Spectacle was his oxygen. He popped the lid, long tongs clamped on the vase, and hurried into the shallows. Steam rose where red-hot clay met lake water, blinding. A cheer erupted. Then the cheering cut short. Through the white cloud, Martin's silhouette pitched forward. The tongs splashed. Something plunked. A heavy sound, as if the lake swallowed a kettlebell. I ran, others close behind. When the steam cleared, only ripples remained. A circle of tourists kept filming, not realizing anything was wrong, until I screamed his name. It took the volunteer fire crew 7 minutes to reach him. They dragged Martin out face down, a glaze of lake weed across his cheek. CPR pounded his chest, but the blue in his lips didn't fade. An ambulance ferried him away. Hours later, Officer Dillon informed us Martin had drowned before they could restart his heart. Because he had slipped, because the water was only 4 feet deep, because accidents happen around open flames and adrenaline, the death certificate read misadventure. Most of the crowd accepted the story, but clay records the tremor of doubt, and my doubt throbbed with each heartbeat. I hadn't missed the confusion in Martin's face as he fell, the stuttered moment of surprise rather than panic. Nor had I missed the absence of his bright orange life vest. Martin couldn't swim. He never approached water without that vest. He'd lent lectures on respecting your weaknesses. So why enter the lake bare-chested? I locked Stonewheel's front door that night, and spread my memory across the studio floor, hoping the truth would take shape like a coiled vessel. When it didn't, I began turning things over, first in my mind, then literally. By morning, I had a plan. Treat the mystery like an unglazed pot, examine every surface, tap for hollow points, fire it until cracks reveal themselves. The suspects formed themselves from the clay of circumstance. 1. Jasmine Ortiz, Martin's studio manager. On Monday, she'd left a tear-shiny voicemail saying, "I should have stopped him." When I visited Red Earth the next day, she was boxing up Martin's personal pieces at breakneck speed. Was it grief or fear they'd be examined? 2. Lila Tran, my former intern, now Martin's apprentice. She claimed Martin had swiped her copper wash recipe and entered it in last month's regional fair under his name. I'd overheard her cursing him 2 nights before the firing. 3. Gregory Hardy, the real estate developer. Both our studios rented space. Greg's investment company owned Martin's building. Rumour said he wanted the land for waterfront condos. Red Earth's lease had 6 months left, an obstacle Greg could dissolve if the tenant defaulted or dissolved himself. 4. Evan Pike, town maintenance worker. Weeks earlier, Martin reported Evan for dumping brush near the lake, which resulted in a hefty fine. Evan swore he'd burn that Potter's kingdom down. The police interviewed them, of course, but Officer Dillon treated every statement as glaze sealed under clear coat. Shiny, finished, not to be questioned. I've overfired enough bowls to know shiny surfaces can hide fractures. I revisited the lakeshore at dawn 2 days after the funeral. Morning fog hovered above the mirror-flat water. Charred straw and broken shards scattered along the sand, remnants of the aborted event. I paced the faint boot prints that hadn't yet washed away. At the spot where Martin fell, I combed the shallows in rubber boots. My toe struck metal. I fished up his raku tongs, one tip snapped clean off. The missing prong, sharp like a bird beak, could have jabbed flesh, but Martin's autopsy reported no puncture. I studied the fracture, fresh, bright steel. Had the tong broken during the fall or before? Back on the beach, I scanned for the broken piece. Instead, my eyes snagged on something pale, tangled in rushes, braided nylon cord, frayed at one end. The standard cord on life vests. Life vest cut loose. I pocketed it and tried to calm the pounding in my chest. If someone had yanked Martin's vest off, the cord could have snapped or been sliced. I needed an ally inside Red Earth. Jasmine still hadn't returned my texts, so I showed up after hours carrying espresso and a box of chocolate croissants, Martin's favourite bribe. Her face was raw with exhaustion, but she opened the door. "Don't tell me you came to poach my students already," she said, attempting humour that shrank midway. "I came because the story the police settled on isn't sitting right with me," I replied. "Neither with you, I think." Her shoulders sagged. "I told them he never went near water without the vest. It was hanging by the kiln that morning, ready. After the accident, it was gone." I handed over the braided cord. "Found this at the lake." She ran the strands over her fingers, recognition flashing. "That's from his vest pocket. He kept a whistle on it." Tears pooled. "They're shelving everything as accident, Fiona. I keep trying to replay it. He just tipped." "Someone was close enough to push," I said. The words felt obscene, yet unavoidable. Jasmine's gaze hardened, grief soldering into resolve. "We have security cameras in the loading bay." "Cameras?" I blinked. The loading bay opened toward the rear parking lot. During the Raku setup, we'd all carried equipment through it. "Footage for the morning?" She led me to Martin's cramped office. We scrolled through time-stamped thumbnails. Most showed students hauling boxes, Martin's cobalt blue truck, and my silver hatchback. At 7:24 a.m., just before the event, a figure darted inside. Lila Tran. Her hoodie hood up, backpack slung high. She emerged minutes later carrying something orange and bulky. The image resolution was grainy, but my stomach recognized the life vest. Jasmine inhaled sharply. She told police she met us at the beach. She did, I said, and she was wearing that hoodie. Our list of suspects narrowed to one. But motive? I contacted Lila, claiming I needed to return a rib tool she'd once loaned me. She agreed to meet at my studio after closing. While wedging clay, I rehearsed questions. But when Lila arrived, she spoke first. "Is this about Martin?" she asked, arms crossed. "Partly. I found something of his at the lake. I think you took it from the studio that morning." I offered no details, watching her pulse leap in her throat. Her gaze slid away. "Did Jasmine put you up to this?" "No, the clay did," I answered. She let out an exasperated huff, half laugh, half snarl. For a moment she looked very young, 23, still unkilned, surface soft. Finally she said, "He stole from me, Fiona. You know he did. Your glaze recipe. And my future," she hissed. "I'm drowning in loans. That prize money was supposed to pay next semester. Instead, he strutted on stage with my copper-wash teapot." "I understand anger," I said, "but theft doesn't equal murder." She flinched. "I didn't kill him." "You removed his life vest." "Yeah, to scare him. He planned another showy dunk. I thought if he realized he'd forgotten the vest, he'd step back from the water. He'd apologize, maybe." Her voice wavered. "I hid it under a tarp by the benches, but someone must have moved it again. He never noticed it missing." "Why not tell the police?" She pressed palms to eyes. "They'd charge me with negligence at least. And you think they'd believe me after seeing my texts about carving him up like a clay slab?" She exhaled shakily. "I hated him, but I didn't push him." The desperation seemed genuine. Still, I'd trusted charming surfaces before. "Where were you during the fall?" I asked. "Filming from the far side." She pulled out her phone, thumb tremoring as she opened a video. Martin pranced across the sand, vase glowing, crowd whooping. The climax, he stepped into the lake and vanished in steam. Lila's camera jerked, footage went haywire, but in that scattered second, a dark figure stood behind Martin at the shoreline, arm extended. The frame blurred. I rewound. Finger on pause, enlarged as far as pixels allowed. Hoodie, no. Work jacket, tan like Carhartt. Baseball cap, stocky build. Greg Hardy favored that outfit. I visited the county courthouse next, requesting public records. Greg's development firm had indeed filed demolition plans for Red Earth's block, conditional on vacant occupancy. Hidden in a footnote, he'd purchased an option agreement with contingencies triggered by involuntary cessation of business operations. Martin dead, business stopped, contingency triggered. $800,000 of lakefront property freed. I needed proof Greg had been on that beach. Video pixels weren't enough. So I dug into the shards. The broken tong point still lacked a partner. If Greg wrestled Martin, maybe the tong struck rock, snapping. Its twin shard could embed where he'd stood. I returned to the lake in the afternoon, tide low. The shore glimmered with mica flecks. I traced Martin's path, then 20 feet behind, the probable place of impact. Kneeled, sifted through gritty clay. 10 minutes later, metal winked. The missing prong, scuffed, coated in rust-orange sand. Victory. Yet I needed Greg's fingerprint, fibre, something connective. The prong's underside glistened faintly. I slipped it into a plastic bag, careful not to smudge possible prints. Though beach sand and water likely erased traces, I had another idea. In my studio, I rinsed the prong. The distal end bore a smear of dried, dark material. Not rust, but resinous. I scraped a sample, placed it under my jeweler's loupe. Flecks of varnish? Or wood sealer? Martin's tongs wouldn't pick that up from rocks. But Greg's company had recently varnished the boardwalk railings with a distinctive marine-grade epoxy dyed forest green. I phoned Officer Dillon, explaining discoveries. His skepticism warmed only after Jasmine delivered the surveillance video showing Lila hiding the vest, and I provided the boardwalk epoxy sample and Greg's demolition documents. Still, he required more before a warrant. So I decided to make one last pot out of conversation. The summer business mixer hosted at the Lakeshore Tavern 2 nights later provided the kiln. Greg held court near the bar, telling aldermen how his condos would elevate property values. I approached with 2 beers. "Condolences," I said. "The pottery community is reeling." Greg offered a solemn nod. "Terrible loss, but we carry on." "I heard you filmed the Raku event," I lied casually. "Would love to see that footage." His eyes flickered, calculating. "I wasn't filming." "Oh, someone mentioned you were right by the shore." Colour rose in his neck. "Well, briefly, I congratulated Martin." "You were in the water?" I asked, feigning awe. "Must have been slippery." He gulped half his beer. "Look, Fiona, accidents." "Funny thing about accidents," I cut in. "They don't break tongs against railings varnished with custom epoxy." I laid the tong tip on the table. The green resin catch-lighted under neon signs. Greg's face blanched, mouth shaping silent curses. I leaned close. "The police know. Prints or no prints, epoxy tells stories. Walk away from this table and they'll pick you up before you reach your SUV. Stay, and maybe they'll hear your side first." Greg's shoulders slumped, air hissing from him like deflating slip bag. He whispered, "I only meant to scare him, force a buyout." He panicked, grabbed me. We lost balance. He went under. I tried. His confession spilled, cracked, poured out like over-wet slip, mixing lies and truth. But he admitted the push, the lack of help, the moment he let the water finish the job. Officer Dillon, whom I had texted to wait outside, entered and read Greg his rights. I watched steel cuffs click shut, feeling neither triumph nor relief, only the weird hollowness left when a pot is cut from the wheel too soon. Lila received misdemeanor charges for tampering, but avoided jail after speaking against Greg. Jasmine inherited Red Earth's equipment. The town council granted her a permit to continue under a new name, Phoenix Clay Works. On reopening day, she invited me to co-host the next Raku firing. I accepted under one condition: deep water barrels instead of lake quenching. Weeks later, I stood on that same beach at sunset. The lake, indifferent as ever, lapped softly. I held a small Raku urn I'd thrown for Martin, copper flashes ghosting across obsidian glaze. I scattered a handful of his cremains into the water. The ripples carried them outward, no fireworks, no crowd, only the hiss of sand under wind. Clay is honest, it remembers every touch. Crescent Lake will remember too, but I take comfort in knowing the story can't stay buried. Like a kiln-fired pot arc bright in open air, the truth finally cooled, revealing its crackle